I didn't raise my voice that night. I didn't argue. I didn't even move. I watched my 6-year-old daughter shrink in her chair while my sister laughed at the device on her ear, and my father brushed it off as a joke. Forks clinked. Smiles stayed. I stayed silent. My husband didn't. He stood up, walked to the door, and opened it without a word. Just a boundary. What they didn't know was this. By the next morning, that silence would change everything. Before I tell you how, tap like, comment where you're listening from, and share if you've ever protected your child from family. My name is Lily. I'm in my late 30s, a mother, a wife, and someone my family has never quite known how to place. I've always been the quiet one, the reliable one, the person who shows up early, leaves late, and doesn't ask for much in return. If you met me on the street, you wouldn't guess much. Simple clothes, no jewelry worth noticing, a calm face that people often mistake for softness. I let them. That night we were hosting dinner at our house. Nothing special, just a long table food I'd cooked since early afternoon and the low hum of the vent above the stove that never quite turns off. My daughter Emma sat beside me, swinging her legs under the chair, her fingers brushing the small hearing device tucked behind her ear. She'd only been wearing it for a few weeks. Every morning before school, she stood in front of the mirror, tilting her head, asking, "Does it look weird today?" And every morning I told her the truth. "It looks like you." Emma is 6, curious, gentle. She hears the world a little differently now, and she's learning how to trust it again. We'd been practicing sounds at the kitchen table, the click of a pen, the timer on the oven, my voice when I whispered her name. That night she was proud. She wanted everyone to see how brave she was being. My sister Rachel arrived late as usual. Loud laugh, sharp eyes. She scanned the room the way some people check prices, measuring, judging. My parents followed her lead, settling into their seats like this was all familiar territory. Comfortable, predictable. My brother barely looked up from his phone. At first, the conversation stayed safe. Work, traffic, someone's upcoming vacation. Emma leaned toward me and whispered when she heard her name across the table, her face lighting up every time she caught a word on her own. Then Rachel noticed the device. She didn't ask. She didn't lower her voice. She pointed, tilted her head, and smiled in that way that always made my stomach tighten. The table went quiet for just a second. Not the awkward kind, the waiting kind. I answered before anyone else could. Calm, measured. I explained what it was, why Emma needed it, how well she was doing. I kept my voice steady because I believed stupidly that clarity would be enough. My mother's smile tightened. My father leaned back in his chair. Emma stopped swinging her legs. I felt something shift in the room. Not loud, not sudden. Just a subtle change, like the air pressure dropping before a storm you don't see coming yet. And still, I stayed seated. Still, I tried to hold the moment together. I didn't realize then that this was the last normal minute we were going to have. Rachel didn't laugh right away. She leaned forward first, squinting like she was trying to understand a puzzle she didn't respect. Her finger hovered in the air, not quite pointing, but close enough to make my chest tighten. "So that's what that is," she said. "I thought it was some kind of gadget." I felt Emma's shoulder press into my arm. Her body went still. The kind of still that isn't calm, just careful. I explained again. Slower this time. What the device did. How it helped Emma hear certain frequencies. How it wasn't a phase or something we could just outgrow. I chose my words the way I always did around my family, trimming off anything that might sound emotional. Facts only. Clean edges. No room for misunderstanding. Rachel smiled and shook her head. "She's so little," she said. "It just feels sad. Don't you think?" The word hung there. Sad. My mother reached for her water glass, took a sip, and set it down too carefully. "People notice these things," she said, not looking at Emma. "Kids can be cruel." I wanted to ask her who exactly she thought was being cruel in that moment. Instead, I breathed in through my nose and counted silently the way I had learned to do years ago. My father chuckled. Not warmly, not unkindly either, just dismissive. "Come on," he said. "It's not like anyone's attacking her. We're just talking." Rachel lifted her glass. "Exactly. It's just conversation." Emma's fingers moved up to her ear. She touched the device, then dropped her hand like she'd been caught doing something wrong. I spoke again. My voice didn't shake, but it felt thinner now. She understands more than you think. That was when my father sighed long and exaggerated, like I was making the evening difficult on purpose. He waved his hand palm up. Lily, he said, you're taking this way too personally. It's a joke. You need to lighten up. The word joke landed harder than anything Rachel had said. Because jokes don't make a child look down at their plate and stop eating. Because jokes don't make the room feel smaller. My mother nodded, relieved. He's right, she added. No one means anything by it, but maybe going forward you could look into something a little less obvious, just to make things easier. Easier for who? I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I felt the familiar pressure in my chest, the old instinct to smooth things over to protect everyone else from discomfort. I'd done it my whole life, made myself smaller so the room could stay calm. Across the table, Emma's eyes were glossy. She wasn't crying. She was trying not to. She leaned toward me and whispered so quietly I almost missed it. Did I do something wrong? That was the moment everything inside me stopped negotiating. I didn't answer right away. I put my hand over hers, warm and steady, even though my pulse was loud in my ears. I looked around the table, at my sister's impatient expression, at my parents' expectant faces, waiting for me to laugh it off, to cooperate. I realized then that if I spoke, nothing would change, so I stayed quiet. And in that silence, I felt something shift. Not in them, in me. The silence didn't last long. Mark pushed his chair back, not abruptly, just enough for the legs to scrape softly against the floor. That sound cut through the room better than any raised voice could have. He stood, straightened his sleeves, and walked toward the front door. No speech, no warning. He opened it and stepped aside. At first, no one moved. My father laughed, unsure, like this was some strange pause in a play he didn't understand. Rachel rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath. My mother clutched her napkin tighter, confusion flickering across her face. Mark didn't look at them. He kept his eyes on the open doorway. Out, he said quietly. Just one word, calm, final. That was when the room fractured. Rachel stood up, her voice sharp, offended. My parents followed, talking over each other, insisting this was dramatic, unnecessary, embarrassing. Someone said the word family like it was a shield, like it excused everything that had just happened. Mark stayed where he was. They passed me without meeting my eyes. When the door closed behind them, the house went still. Not tense, empty. The kind of quiet that feels earned. Emma's breath hitched. I pulled her onto my lap, felt her small body curl inward, like she was bracing for something else to go wrong. Are they mad at me? She asked. No, I said immediately. My voice surprised me. It was steadier than I felt. They're wrong. She nodded like she wanted to believe me. Later that night, after Mark tucked Emma into bed and waited until her breathing evened out, I went downstairs alone. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat at the desk in the corner of the living room, the one I usually use to pay bills after everyone else was asleep. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed familiar and unremarkable. A simple spreadsheet. Rows and columns I'd built over years. Nothing dramatic at first glance, just numbers, dates. Notes I'd written to myself and never expected anyone else to see. Tuition payments, medical bills, monthly transfers, all quiet, all consistent. I scrolled slowly. I remembered the first time I added a line, a small one. Just help, I told myself. Temporary, then another, and another. It had become routine, like breathing. Something I did without thinking because I could. I hadn't told them. Not because I was hiding, because I didn't want it to matter. I clicked into my bank portal. The cursor blinked, waiting. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt clear. I started canceling the payments one by one. No drama, no messages attached, just confirmations appearing quietly on the screen. Each click felt like loosening a knot I'd been carrying for years. When I closed the laptop, the house was still quiet. Upstairs, Emma slept peacefully, her hearing aid resting on the nightstand beside her favorite book. By morning, the silence would reach far beyond these walls, and they would finally notice. The first call came just before 7. I was in the kitchen standing barefoot on the cold tile pouring cereal into a bowl, while Emma sat at the counter humming softly to herself. She liked doing that now, testing sounds, playing with them, stretching them out to see how they felt in the air. My phone vibrated against the counter. I didn't look at it. A second call followed. Then a third. Mark glanced at me over his coffee mug. I shook my head slightly. Not yet. Emma tilted her head. "Is it loud?" she asked. "No," I said. "It can wait." By the time I walked her to the door and watched her climb onto the bus, my phone had stopped buzzing and started lighting up. Missed calls, messages stacking on top of each other. The kind of urgency people only have when something they rely on suddenly disappears. I drove home slowly. When I walked back into the house, the quiet felt different than it had the night before. Heavier, charged, like the air before a storm finally breaks. I sat at the desk and picked up my phone. The first message was from my mother. There must be some mistake. The school called. They said the payment didn't go through. I typed back calmly. "There's no mistake." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then Rachel called. I answered. "What did you do?" she demanded. No greeting, no hesitation. "I stopped the payments," I said. "What payments?" Her voice wavered just enough to tell me she already knew. "The ones I've been making for years." There was a pause. A long one. "That's not funny, Lily," she said. "The school is saying we owe a huge amount." "I'm sure they are." She laughed sharply. "You don't get to just pull something like this. Sophie and Nathan's education isn't a game." I leaned back in my chair and looked at the window. The street outside was quiet. Ordinary. "It's not a game," I said. "It's a responsibility, one that belongs to you and your husband." Her breathing turned fast. "You're not making any sense." So I stopped softening it. "The tuition payments, the ones covering both kids, those came from me." Silence. "I set it up years ago," I continued. "I didn't announce it. I didn't put my name on anything. I just made sure the bills were paid." "You don't have that kind of money," she said finally. Flat, certain. I almost smiled. "I work in medical technology," I said. "That's all you've ever needed to know. But what I actually do, it's done well." Her voice dropped. "How well?" "Well enough to pay for private school, apparently." She whispered my name like she was trying to ground herself. "This is insane. Last night was a joke. You're blowing this out of proportion." "A joke," I repeated. That made my daughter touch her ear like it was something shameful. "That's not what I meant." "I don't know what you meant," I said. "I know what happened." She started talking fast then, apologizing without saying sorry, explaining without taking responsibility, promising she'd talk to the kids, that she didn't realize that she was stressed, that it wasn't fair to punish them. "I'm not punishing them," I said. "I'm stepping back." I ended the call. My father called next. He didn't yell. That surprised me. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tight. "Your mother is upset." "The club called. The billing office at her doctor's office called too." "Yes," I said. "I canceled everything." He laughed, disbelieving. "Everything, the membership, the extra medical bills, the support I've been giving your son, all of it." There was a long silence. "Why would you do that?" he asked finally. Over something so small, I closed my eyes. "Small," I said. "My daughter asked me if she was broken." He exhaled sharply. "You're being emotional." "No," I said. "I'm being clear. You never told us you were paying for these things," he said. "How were we supposed to know?" "That's exactly the point," I replied. "You didn't know? You didn't ask? You didn't wonder?" He tried a different approach. "We're family." Family. The word felt thin now. "Family doesn't mock a child," I said. "Family doesn't suggest hiding medical equipment to protect appearances. Family doesn't benefit quietly and then dismiss the person providing it." He went quiet. "I've been covering roughly the same amount every month for years," I continued. "I kept track. I always keep track." "You don't need to do this," he said. His voice had changed, softer. "Careful. We can talk." "We did talk," I said. "Last night. You told me to lighten up." My mother took the phone. Her voice was already breaking. "We didn't mean it that way." "Then how did you mean it?" I asked gently. She didn't answer. "I didn't stop supporting you because I was angry," I said. "I stopped because I finally understood something. You didn't respect me. You respected what you thought I couldn't do." She cried then. Real tears. "We love Emma," she said. "Love isn't what you say," after I replied. "It's what you do in the moment." I ended the call before she could ask what I knew she was about to ask. My brother called last. He sounded panicked. "My account is overdrawn," he said. "The payment didn't go through. I need to know what's happening." "I stopped making the payments," I said. "What payments?" he asked, confused. "The ones covering your business loan." "That's not possible," he said quickly. "I never took a loan from you. You took one from a bank," I said. "I made the payments." His voice dropped to a whisper. "For how long?" "Years." "Oh my God." He started explaining immediately how he thought the bank had adjusted something, how he assumed things were fine, how he never questioned it. I said, "You just didn't notice." He apologized over and over, promised to make things right, promised to talk to Rachel, to our parents. "I'm not doing this to teach you a lesson," I said. "I'm doing it because I'm done being invisible." When the calls finally stopped, the house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't empty. It felt balanced. That afternoon, I picked Emma up from school. She ran toward me, smiling, telling me about a sound she'd heard during reading time. A bell she'd never noticed before. "Did you hear it all by yourself?" I asked. She nodded proudly. "I did." That night, I tucked her into bed. She looked at me carefully, the way children do when they're deciding whether to ask something important. "Are they still mad?" she asked. I brushed her hair back. "They're dealing with their own feelings." She considered that. "I don't think I like their jokes." I smiled softly. "You don't have to." After she fell asleep, I stood in the doorway for a long time. The next few days were exactly what you'd expect. Consequences arriving without warning. Adjustments being made. Anger turning into reality. No one asked me to restore the payments. They understood finally that the silence they'd taken for granted had been holding everything up. And once it was gone, there was no pretending otherwise. The fallout didn't come all at once. It arrived in quiet updates, secondhand information, and changes no one announced out loud. Rachel pulled her kids out of the private school. I heard it from my mother, who mentioned it carefully like she was testing where the ground was still solid. New routines, longer commutes, less room for extras. She didn't complain. Not to me. My parents canceled memberships they'd held onto for years. My mother switched doctors. My father sold his car and bought something practical. Ordinary. The kind of adjustments I'd been making in my own life for a long time without anyone noticing. My brother took a job he'd once dismissed as beneath him. He stopped talking about potential and started talking about stability. No one asked me to help. That mattered. I redirected the money quietly, the same way I'd always done things, toward programs that helped children like Emma access hearing support earlier, toward families who didn't have the luxury of pretending medical needs were optional. It felt right, clean. At home, the change was gentler. Emma stopped asking if her hearing aid looked strange. One afternoon, she told me a classmate thought it was kind of cool and wanted to know how it worked. She said it casually, like it wasn't something she'd practiced believing yet. I let her get there on her own. The family group chat went silent. No photos, no updates, just space. And in that space, I felt something settle. Not triumph, relief. A week later, Emma brought home a drawing. 3 stick figures. Me, Mark, her. No explanations, no hesitation. "This is my family," she said. I understood then that boundaries don't break families. They reveal them. Emma's hearing aid isn't something we hide anymore. It's part of how she meets the world. Confident,